G'day guys, everyone out there, welcome back. My name's Dan and I'm the head reptile keeper at the Australian Reptile Park, and welcome back to one of our live streams. We really hope you've been enjoying these videos. There's plenty more to see throughout the rest of the week, and make sure you check out Animal Tales with Tim Faulkner every day at 10 o'clock. But enough about Tim, now we're going to talk about the coolest reptile, and I say that with a little bit of bias, but it is true. Kraken, our very big, handsome Komodo dragon. So every single day we take our Komodo dragons out on a walk, just like this. So we place this little harness on there and we allow the Komodo to walk throughout the entirety of the park. It's really important, not only for their mental stimulation, but also to exercise is key with keeping these lizards big and healthy. But a little bit about Kraken, and then we'll talk about some of their features. Kraken came to the reptile park about 7.5 years ago. He was born at LA Zoo, and then was imported to Australia along with 7 other dragons that are found around different zoos and wildlife parks in this country. Now when he came, he was only about as long as my arm, about this long, and you could hold him up in one arm. You really can't do that anymore. Now he weighs around 40 kilograms. Now that sounds pretty big, but by the time Kraken's fully grown, who knows, he might weigh anywhere up to 65, maybe 70 kilograms. Really large adult male Komodo dragons on Komodo Island itself can reach maximum weight of around 100 kilograms. Now we work very, very closely with these lizards every single day, and you can see how relaxed Kraken is with the keepers that work with him. Now, this animal has the potential to take down an animal as large as a water buffalo or a deer, but you can see right now Kraken does not associate me with food at all. He knows that we're going out on a walk and I'll give him a little pat on the head. He doesn't see me as a potential food source. Now, to be honest, the only time Kraken thinks about food is when we give him a visual cue to say that it's time for dinner or for lunch. We've trained or conditioned these Komodo dragons to respond to 2 colours. Now the colour blue, a blue tennis ball we show them, simply means that we're going to be taking the Komodo dragon out on a walk, just like we're doing right now. And we're going to run between the barbecues here, which is going to look great on camera. So they'll see the blue tennis ball, which means they're going out for a walk or potentially having an encounter and basically interaction with their keepers. When he sees a bright orange tennis ball, that's when they start to behave a bit more like a wild lizard. When they see that orange ball, they know exactly what's coming. They know they're about to be fed. So that allows us to really, really safely kind of predict how the Komodo dragon's going to behave. Now we're in an area where there's kangaroos, ducks, other animals that this lizard should look at as potential food, but he simply doesn't associate them with food when we're out in this kind of situation. He knows that he has to wait till the orange ball comes out, and then I will feed him immediately. And we feed the Komodo dragon a very mixed diet, so anything from fish to chicken to rat, and typically what we'll feed them is large carcass feed, so goat or pig. So we throw in a large carcass, we allow the Komodo dragon to gorge feed on that carcass, fill up their body, and then we won't feed the Komodo dragon for maybe 3 to 4 weeks. There's sometimes where we won't feed the Komodo dragon for 3 to 4 weeks, other times we will feed them every single week. Now a couple of features about Komodo dragons, you can see every few seconds he's sticking out that long, slender forked tongue. Now, just like a snake, they use that forked tongue to pick up scent particles, airborne, non-airborne scent particles, which allows them to transmit information to the brain. So they stick that forked tongue out. The fork gives them a sense of direction. Say they're trying to track down a predator, maybe a water buffalo has passed away and the Komodo dragon in the wild's going to go eat it. If they get a stronger scent on their left-hand side of the tongue, they're going to head in that direction. So that's basically what the fork does. Whilst they do have very good eyesight and good sense of hearing as well, their chemosensory skills are by far their most advanced sensory organ. So they can track a dying carcass or rotten carcass kilometres away. So the thing with Komodo dragons, and I guess why they're so relaxed, if you compare them maybe to a tiger or a lion, if a lion doesn't eat for a week or 2, it's potentially at risk of starvation. This Komodo dragon, even Kraken in his current shape that he's in now, if he didn't eat now for another 6 months, his body condition probably isn't going to change too much at all. He might lose a few kilos in that time, but he would be able to sustain himself. And that's the advantage of being ectotherm, so an animal that relies on outside heat sources to warm themselves up, like the sun, rather than being an endotherm like a mammal, like a lion, who constantly need to refuel their body. They constantly need to eat. But as I said before, we typically feed them larger food items more sparingly rather than lots of little items every single day. And that enables us to keep the lizard in this really pristine, shape. We try to keep them fit, very muscular, and then hopefully we'll get out the maximum lifespan for the Komodo in captivity. Now these particular lizards, they're not endemic to Australia, so you won't find them in Australia, but if you go to the island, the Sunda Islands of Indonesia, you might come across the Komodo dragon. Now obviously the most famous island that they're found on is the one named after the lizards, Komodo Island itself. That particular island has around 4,000 Komodo dragons living on it, and the other islands like Flores Island, well, the western side of Flores Island, you might potentially come across a Komodo dragon as well. In saying that though, once upon a time here in Australia, we also had our really big giant lizards, an animal called Varanus priscus. Now you could imagine seeing a 5.5 metre long lizard that might have weighed a few hundred kilos that could take down giant wombats. That's exactly what we had here in Australia about 20,000 years ago. Even in Australia we have a large diversity of varanids or goanna species, and that of course is what the Komodo dragon is itself. This is the world's largest living varanid or monitor species, the largest extent species. Now here in Australia we've got lots of monitors. Our smallest only gets to around 20 centimetres long. Our largest, the parenti, grows substantially larger than that. A couple of metres long and potentially maybe 10 to 15 kilograms. But they've got nothing on a Komodo dragon. The females, they usually get to around maybe 1.8, 2.1 metres long and weigh 30 to 40 kilos. But it's the males that are substantially larger. And a lot of that comes back to male ritualized combat. They will fight. So the biggest boy, the strongest boy, the most powerful male will fight the other males off. He's the one that'll be successful in most likely breeding with the females in his area. Now Komodo dragons do like to move around a lot, particularly the males. They'll move around their home range and in the wild they've been tracked walking up to 6, maybe 7 kilometres in a single day. And what they're walking around for is potentially a dead animal. But in saying that, they still have the ability to predate on something as large as a water buffalo. And what they do, they usually lay in ambush on a walking trail, and they'll wait for an animal like a deer to walk past, and then they can grab them. And that's where they bring in these. Now if you can bring that camera in nice and close, that is a Komodo dragon tooth. That particular tooth came straight out of Kraken. They'll shed their teeth periodically. Now these teeth, they're razor sharp. They've got all these serrations that line the back of the tooth. So you could imagine if you're a deer, you've walked past a Komodo dragon, it grabs you on the leg. Lots of teeth go into your leg, you start to bleed profusely. You have a large open wound. You're going to weaken very, very quickly. Now if you don't die from blood loss in 24 hours, which is the most likely outcome, you're probably going to die potentially a couple of weeks later of infection. Remember that forked tongue, it'll come into play, it'll track that prey item, they'll come along, they'll eat it, they'll gorge feed, and then I said they might not eat for another 2 to 3 weeks. In one point they might eat anywhere between 30 to maybe 60-70% of their entire body weight in one sitting. So large gorge feed, then they don't have to eat anywhere near as often. Now I did mention before, I'm going to just spin him around. You go this way. You're a good boy. You can see how relaxed he is working with the keepers. We do give him a little pat, we get up nice and close, and we actually generally do allow people to get up close to the Komodo dragons as well, because you can see how relaxed they are in this kind of environment. When a Komodo dragon hatches out of an egg, and they hatch from an egg, all goanna species or monitor species lay eggs. When they hatch out of an egg, one of the more immediate things they will do is behave a little bit more like our lace monitor that you'll find in Australia. They start to head up the trees. Now the reason they head up the trees is so they avoid potential predation of all right, you go that way. Potential predation from another Komodo dragon, so they don't be cannibalized by their own species. So they are very arboreal in those first few years. Once they start to get as big as Kraken is now, there's really no need for it. There's not too many threats to an animal as big as Kraken outside of humans. So once you're this big, you actually are quite safe. So they come down from the trees, they become these big, strong, powerful lizards, and they live much more of a terrestrial lifestyle. But in saying that, our female Komodo dragon here at the park only weighs about 20 kilos. Any opportunity she has to climb, she will do it. She loves climbing and getting up nice and high. But obviously we try and limit it with Kraken a little bit because we don't want him to hurt himself. But the female Komodo dragon, whose name's Daenerys, still does attempt to climb at times. All right, boy, go this way. He's making me work for it today, isn't he? Now, in terms of breeding, so what will usually happen with a female Komodo dragon is she will dig a nest and then lay anywhere between maybe 40 eggs up to, sometimes a little bit more than that. Inside that egg, you've got this tiny little Komodo dragon starting to develop, and about 8 months later, a little baby Komodos that look very, very similar to our lace monitors will hatch out of the egg. There is obviously some kind of scent underneath there that he's really, really attracted to. He keeps heading back in that particular direction. He's following that tongue. I don't know what's under there, but he is really, really keen to get back under that board there. But I think he's out now. Hopefully he will relax a little bit. So the tongue's still sticking out, but you can see a lot of people ask us about these black holes behind their eyes here. That's their ears. Now the ears themselves are covered by a scale called a tympanum. Obviously that'll stop debris get inside the ear canal, but yeah, that is their ears, about 1 inch behind their eyes. They've got excellent eyesight. They obviously see in colour. That's why we train them with coloured balls. You go that way. He's making me work.
How heavy is he, Dan?
How heavy is he? Great question. So Kraken weighs 40 kilograms. So he's a big lizard, but he's going to keep growing. At the moment, he's only 8.5 years of age. So by the time he's fully grown, maybe when he's about 15 years of age, he'll probably be topping the scales at around 60 kilograms. He's 2.1 meters long, making sure I get my stats right today, but he's 2.1 meters long and weighs around 40 kilograms. Our female Komodo dragon is 1.8 meters long and weighs 23 kilograms the last time we did happen to weigh her.
So how old can they get in the wild?
So about the maximum lifespan for a male Komodo dragon, and it is the males that typically do live longer than the females, around 40 years of age. In captivity, one of the oldest Komodo dragons to ever live was a touch over 30 years, around 35 years old, and he lived at Taronga Zoo, and his name was Tuka. He was a big, beautiful lizard, and I like to think that Kraken will be here for at least another, 30 years? That'd be great, maybe even more. The males typically do live longer than the females, and if you understand that the role that they play in the reproductive process isn't anywhere near as taxing as the one that the females does. So the female's the one that have to carry eggs and lose all that calcium, so that is at times a little bit detrimental to them, and they typically have a shorter lifespan than the boys.
Bit of a controversial topic, and I think you were expecting this question to come today.
Yep.
Are they venomous?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I talked about this the other day in the monitor video. If you get bitten by a monitor, you just can't explain the bite. You bleed profusely like nothing else. It's not like a snake bite or anything else. It's very, very different. And that got researchers, scientists to look into why that happens. Why do you bleed so much from a bite from a lizard? Now first, obviously, they've got these big teeth, razor sharp. As I said, they're serrated like a steak knife along the back. But also too, you bleed and you bleed and you bleed. So they looked into it, and they actually have venom glands in their bottom jaw. Now that produces a mild anticoagulant, which obviously inhibits the ability for blood to clot. So you've got a large open wound, they've got a venomous bite that encourages blood loss, so that is going to encourage even more blood loss, which is going to weaken prey item and make them even easier to predate on. Remember I mentioned before about how much they love to climb? So yes, technically they are venomous, and if you look at their relationship with other varanoid species like heliderms, which is your Mexican bearded lizard, and your Gila monster, which are true venomous lizards, it's really not a surprise. And they have venom glands in that bottom jaw.
I'll give you a chance to move him, Dan, if you like. I'll give you a break of talking.
It's probably going to be even harder to get him down, actually. I might just let him do his thing.
Yeah, no worries. So in saying that, is it dangerous, and what kind of safety precautions do you have to take as a keeper working with this species?
Yeah, you have to remember that, I always say the same thing, is that the tamest dog in the world can bite if it has a bad day. And that could be your dog that's never done anything wrong in the entirety of its life. So we treat the Komodo dragon exactly the same. All the keepers that work with Kraken basically spend plenty of time with him. We've built a relationship with him, and I like to think we trust him, but we're also watching for different cues that he might give us to suggest that he's potentially going to bite. Now, a Komodo dragon will bend its tail to whip you with its tail. He'll start to puff his throat out, any kind of behaviour like that, and we might think a little bit about going in as close as we usually do to give him a pat. But yeah, we are very cautious. I've got Brandon over in the side there who's helping me today. He's kind of keeping an eye and making sure it all goes nice, safely and smoothly. Kraken is so much more focused on everything that is happening around him. He's not really worried by me at all. In his enclosure, they can be a little bit different, but typically when he's out like this, he's just having a heap of fun.
Looks like he's having fun. So you were saying before they climb, do they do that much as adults, or is it mainly a juvenile
No,
thing?
they get too big. They get way too big.
Kind of like Kraken is
Kind of
now.
like Kraken. So he's like, it's like they get lazy too. They talk about male Komodo dragons in particular. They'll walk around a lot, but they've got this amazing ability to swim like most of our monitor lizards. They can swim incredibly long distances at times, but they most of the time choose not to. There is no point for a 80-kilo Komodo dragon to climb up a tree to eat a small bird. There's really no need for the Komodo dragon to put itself at risk, because if it falls and injures itself, it could potentially die. So once they're this large and once they're this robust and muscular, they're much more suited to the terrestrial lifestyle, as opposed to when they're smaller, really long tail, much more agile, moving around in tree branches, much more advantageous for a smaller animal than a big lizard like this.
Is there a way to tell the difference between boys and girls?
There is. So they are sexually dimorphic, and when we talk about sexual dimorphism for Komodo dragons, we're talking about size. There is a difference in the head shape too. When you look at a male Komodo dragon, they got a buff head. When you look at a females, they got a much more petite head, but the size. Females will only reach a maximum size of say 30 to 40 kilograms, maximum. The males can double that. And as I said before, a lot of that, particularly in the reptile world, comes back to ritualized combat. The males have to be big. The male has to be dominant so he can mate with the females in his area.
Are they endangered?
Yes, they are. Because they're only found, really, you're talking about a handful of islands in the Lesser Sunda part of Indonesia. Most of that population is found on one island only. It's 4,000 kilometres square, that's it. So it's a fifth the size of Tasmania. It's not a very, very big place. Now, I don't trust my maths, but I hope that's about right. So they're found in this very small area. So a viral disease, a natural disaster, anything like that could potentially put these animals at risk. So having animals in captivity is a backup for that, if there was ever a need for a captive insurance population. So having Komodo dragons here in Australia, great educational tool as well. Could you imagine 20,000 years ago walking through the northern part of Australia and seeing a big giant monitor bigger than Komodo dragons? How cool that would have been. They're a great animal for people to appreciate up close as well, because you watch them in a documentary and they look like they're the most fearsome animal on the planet. He doesn't look too bad today, does he? He's more like a Labrador than a Komodo dragon sometimes.
Well, talking about Labradors, why do you take these guys on walks?
Yeah, people should walk their Labradors more. No, exercise. Exercise is key. It's almost a forgotten word in the world of reptiles. These animals need to stay mobile. If you don't move it, you'll lose it. And we're talking about their muscles, their bones, all that kind of stuff. So keep them nice and fit, keep the muscle nice and toned. Let them exercise. If they walk a few kilometres in the wild every day, why not let them do that here at the park? We walk our Komodos every single day, and I reckon it's one of the reasons why he has this really nice streamlined physique. He's quite a fit animal. There's no real fat on him. He's very muscular, and hopefully that will ensure that he'll live for a very, very long time here at the park.
And one last question. Are they carnivores, or can they eat meat as well? Do they eat vegetation?
They're obligate carnivores, so they only eat meat. But if you think of the animals that they eat, they're primarily feeding on herbivorous species, so they'll get a lot of those herbivorous nutrients from the food that they're eating. So they are obligate carnivores. They only eat meat. Look, to be honest, if I brought down some tofu for Kraken, he probably would try and eat it, but typically he just wants to eat meats, and his diet is varied, not just in the wild but even here at the park. We feed them multiple different food sources, sometimes whole food like rodents or chicken, but a lot of the time, as I said, will be carcass feeds, really large carcass feeds. So we'll throw in a whole pig, we'll throw in a quarter of a cow or whatever. Let them gorge as much food as he wants. Usually he fills himself out to be about this wide. He looks like he's about to explode. He sits under the heat. And then, to be honest, he does explode about a week later when he goes to the toilet. But he sits up on his heat rock, he starts to bask just like they would do out in the wild. We try and keep it as naturalistic to their wild environment as we can here at the park. And their ambient temperature within his enclosure is 30 degrees all year round. Now that's just like, it's like if anyone ever walked off a plane in Darwin, it's really hot and humid. We try to recreate that in their environment here at the reptile park. So they're always hot. We feed them, we keep them moving, and that means hopefully we're going to have healthy, big, happy lizards. And you can see he's having the time of his life.
So just on that gorge feeding, do they primarily only gorge feed in the wild?
Opportunistically, yeah. Well, it depends what size lizard you're talking about. So if they come across, if an animal dies of natural causes, they're going to smell it, they're going to know it's there. But they still have the ability to predate on medium, large size mammals. So if a deer walked past, and it all depends on too, how much food, what food abundance is around. If there's a lot of deer dying in the local area, they don't have to move around too much to find their food. But if they have to go start scavenging, that's when they'd probably start to predate a little bit more. There's a really cool video of a Komodo dragon walking down the beach. Now I love turtles, but it's still cool, with a big giant sea turtle shell on its head, and it's stuck to it and it's strolling down the beach. So make sure you check that out, because it is a really, really cool video. So they'll even go to the beach to predate on dead sea turtles, which I think is pretty amazing.
We'll leave it there today.
Yeah, thanks guys. I hope you enjoyed meeting Kraken. He's one of my favourites. Very cool lizard.
See you next time, guys.